So as Phil mentioned at the beginning of the service, my name is Tim and I'm currently an ordinand studying at Cranmer Hall in the first year of my training to become a vicar. And it's a real delight to be with you this morning as we continue through kind of building up to Lent. It was brilliant last week to gather as the Mine churches at Christ Church Walker and to celebrate Candlemas together. As Phil encouraged us and helped us to think about being interrupted as Jesus interrupts us during our days and our weeks. And this morning's gospel reading flows on from that idea of being interrupted. It flows on from that celebration of Candlemas, as Simeon says that he has seen the light for revelation to the Gentiles. And so we come to maybe a familiar passage in Matthew 5 this morning, maybe not, but a passage I think is really helpful for us as we think about our walk with Jesus. So our passage this morning, where are we sitting? Well, we're sitting right at the beginning of the opening to the Sermon on the Mount, this great collection of Jesus' teachings. As Matthew writes, we can only see the parallels between Jesus here gathered with all the people before him and Moses gathered giving the law to the people of Israel. This is a claim from Matthew straight away that Jesus is this teacher teaching the words of God to his people. And so he starts with these kind of words. And he uses two very striking images that I'd love us just to think about a little bit this morning. So he starts with salt. You are the salt of the earth. But if the salt loses its saltiness, how can it be made salty again? Now, I don't know about you, but when you first hear that, I thought of the little kind of white kind of tub of salt with a little red label on the side next to my cooker that I tip into my food randomly to try and make it taste better. Maybe the ones that we apply to our chips as we sit on the quayside looking out over the water. Although salt only, I don't like vinegar, so it's just salt. But Jesus here is talking about a salt that is dug from the ground. It's dug up of a whole mixture of other kind of items within it, other minerals as well. And so there's a whole process that goes up as you dig it up, as you extract the salt from it, that takes time and needs to be done carefully in order for the salt to remain salty. So don't worry, your cooking salt isn't losing its saltiness. That's not what Jesus is getting at. But he's getting at the fact that it takes time and care to take out this salt from the ground and for it to have its purpose. Now, salt, we know what salt is for. We know that salt goes into our food. We notice that it's there. We know that salt is a substance that makes a difference to the taste of food. Now, the second image Jesus draws our attention to is light. You are the light of the world. A town built on a hill cannot be hidden. Neither do people light a lamp and put it under a bowl. Instead, they put it on its stand and it gives light to everyone in the house. Now, we all know that light is important. We can't do many of our things that we normally do. Whenever we gather in a room like this, we have lights on. It gives us a nice space. But light is especially important without electricity, where we can't just flick a switch. And some of you here will be able to, I'm sure, tell stories of when that was essential to plan to make sure that you had light in your house. And it's exactly the same in the first century. That there was no light without someone lighting something, without someone having planned to have a candle, to have some oil, and to burn that light. And in a first century house, they're nearly always one room. Whenever we hear these stories in the Gospels of Jesus in a house, of Jesus being born in a manger, I think it's helpful for us to imagine that that house is only one room. There are examples today of those houses still. And so one raised light in a darkened room will actually make a huge difference to that room. The other part of this image that Jesus talks about is about being a city on a hill that cannot be hidden. This phrasing takes us back to different images of the Old Testament, particularly in the book of Isaiah. Isaiah chapter 2, God's good news is talked about being like a city on a hill, that the people would gather to this city to hear the good news of God spoken. And then in Isaiah 49, one of my favourite passages, we see that God's people are to be a light to the Gentiles, a light to all those who don't yet know God. So the people of God are to dwell on this hill as people gather to them to hear the good news, but they're also to be a light to all those around them who don't yet know Jesus. The people of God are to make a difference. So what do we notice in these two images of salt and of light? Well, both images make a difference. Salt in our food makes a difference. We notice that it's there, that it brings flavour out. We also notice when it's not there. Maybe when we're trying to be good and the GP said cut down on the salt quantity. But we notice if it's there. And in the same way, a light in a room, it can't be missed. In a room full of darkness, if someone lights a candle, it will make a difference to the room. And I think that's what's encouraging for us this morning and for us to think about, is how these images make a difference. They stand out and you can't miss them. And this made me think actually of my journey into Newcastle every Sunday to come to placement. There is something that I drive past that is high, that is standing out, that I cannot miss on my journey in. The glorious angel of the north stands there as I drive up the A1, telling me, here I am, I have arrived. You can't miss it. You can't help but notice it. But what point is Jesus making about the fact that these things stand out? Following Jesus means that we, as his followers, will stand out. That there will be something different about us that people will notice. Now, I don't know about you, but maybe that feels a little bit unsettling. Maybe you don't want to stand out. Maybe that's not normally how you like to live your life. But I think there's some encouragement in this passage about that. Jesus is talking corporately to the people of God, that together as the people of God, as a community, we stand out. That it's not a faith that's lived by ourselves on our own, but as we gather and encourage and support one another, we allow ourselves to stand out. But how do we stand out? How do we make a difference? A couple of chapters earlier on, we've been introduced to John the Baptist, baptising different people in the River Jordan. Now he stands out because he wears funny clothes and eats funny food, and everyone notices. But thankfully, Jesus is not calling us to stand out in the same way. Instead, similarly to the way that Moses gave the law to the people of God, Jesus here now is opening up his teaching about how we are to live today. As journey through Matthew 5, 6 and 7, which you might do through the next couple of weeks in the lectionary, and then after that maybe you'd like to continue that yourselves in your own time. We see the way that Jesus is picking up some of the things said by Moses, and he's beginning just to flip them slightly. Just to say, you've heard this, but maybe actually God was meaning this. Maybe you've slightly missed a few things. And there's various pieces that Jesus picks up that really would make someone stand out. He tells us to love our enemies. He tells us to pray for those who persecute us. He tells us to take seriously the sin in our lives, often with quite strong language, but the point is to deal with the seriousness of sin. And more than just his teaching, it's Jesus himself who means that we make a difference. It's the Son of God himself. Jesus is the one who makes the difference. He's the one who makes the difference in our lives, And Jesus is the one who can make the difference in the lives of those around us. As much as Jesus calls us the light of the world, is because he first is the light of the world. Declared by Simeon, spoken in John's Gospel, Jesus is the one who is the light of the world, the one who is lifted on a hill, on a cross to die for the world. It's as we follow Jesus, the one who lives out his own teaching, we are able to do the same, to make a difference to the world around us. So as you go from today, I'd love you to think about this difference, this standing out of salt and light. And think about the times where you are during the week. And what would it look like for you to stand out in those places? Stand out by living the way of Jesus, by loving those around us, by having care and patience, and by deciding how we act and behave because of it. Amen.